peppy, isn't it? I say that so many times when I start an episode, but anyway. How you going, guys? And welcome to another episode of What Do You Do for a Crust? With us today, we have a very special guest, a long-lost friend of mine, which I'm very grateful to catch up with. So I'm very grateful for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited. And we are having a lovely glass of wine as well as some... Did you bake these biscuits?
I did not. I would love to take credit for them, but
you should have been like, yeah, they were mine. Yeah, you should have taken the credit. So we do have, technically speaking, we're asking you about a previous role, but we're also asking you about your current role as well, and maybe the transition, depending on how far we get into it. But you were a travel guide who's now transitioned to a teacher. If we start at the travel guide and then we'll go to the teacher, and I'll try and do the first 5 and see how we go and go from there. Pros and cons of being a travel guide?
Pros. So I worked predominantly in Europe. I say predominantly. I only worked in Europe. And the most significant pro was that I was getting paid to literally travel around.
That's the best
Europe.
Pro I think I've ever heard.
Correct. It was very good. There were significant restrictions in regards to I didn't necessarily get to choose where I was going. I would have to go back to the same places over again, as opposed to being able to kind of go, well, this is where I would like to go and visit.
The next place.
But ultimately what it meant for me was that I got to know places really well. And it was just, an incredible experience to be able to go, we're just like hopping on the coach to Paris and we'll be there in 8 hours or so, and then go, all right, here's the driving tour, and the next day I would maybe drop them off for the bike tour, and I would leave them and the passengers would go and do whatever it was they were going to do for their day, and then I would have my day in Paris.
And then you could just do what you want. And,
yeah.
I mean, it sounds fantastic. Like you're physically getting paid to travel around Europe, which, I mean, I envy Europe, particularly we're in Australia, so everything is really far away. Whereas, an 8-hour drive and you're in a different country, different experiences, different culture, different food. Oh, the food and the wine. I miss the cheese. Oh, God.
So good.
Just you can't buy that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, reminiscing on that is just worth its weight in gold, in my opinion. But
yeah, definitely.
Cons?
The cons, I think, were... Yeah, I mean, I guess a really teeny con was not being able to choose sort of where I would go. So that was the kind of thing, was sort of rinsing and repeating things to some extent. And that is, when I say it's a con, that is like the most menial of cons.
But I think in Paris, you're just
correct.
Yeah.
The thing that I think was really challenging was the people. And the people also were an enormous pro. Like, I will be very straight up when I say that I have gone to engagement parties and I've gone to weddings and I've opened my home to people that I've had as passengers, and they have such an ability to make it, but the people also really have the ability to break it. And so sometimes if you have those people that are very draining on your sort of emotional time, the job is 24/7. You don't get into that job going, oh, okay, great, I just drop them in Paris and then I just kind of go and do what I want for the next 2 days. It's definitely not like that at all. But you do have the opportunity to go and do those things that you want to do and sort of be able to make that experience as much yours as you can within the time frame. But you're also very much aware that you're beholden to the people that you are ultimately giving the experience to. And so I think there are people who come into your life and they are amazing and they're such lights and they're wonderful and they make that such a beautiful experience. But the con can be when they're maybe not your kind of people, and maybe just not respectful of the fact that you are doing a job, but you are doing a job for potentially up to 50 people.
Yeah. That's a hell of a, big group.
Yeah, definitely. So I wouldn't say that every group was always 50 people, but you definitely sort of got the impression from some people that they were looking for maybe more of a tailored experience that sort of suited them, rather than going, I am just one of many and that I've chosen to kind of operate in this way.
I mean, it's hard to please 50 people in no matter what avenue you're doing, like realistically. You could put a chicken schnitzel in front of 50 people and, 30 are going to go, oh, I wish it was beef, or, I'd like a salad, or I'd like the seafood, or whatever it might be. Like 50 people is hard to... So the big difference between a good group and a bad group.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's it. That I would say, God, I did probably close to 40 trips, and I would say I maybe had I wouldn't even say that I had one wholly bad group. I know that some of my colleagues had experiences where they had a group that just did not mesh well, and there were it was a conglomeration of people that just were not vibing with each other, and they weren't really making, not that those people are there for the guide, but they weren't making their job in any way
any easier.
Easy.
Yeah.
That being said, I would say that across that many trips that I would have maybe the odd individual or the odd couple that would maybe make that a little bit more of a challenge, but on the whole, the rest of the people kind of made up for it. So yeah.
I would presume to say, there'd be some that are very considerate and courteous, and then there's some that maybe have some self-entitlement or just, you're here to help me and work for me and, all those kind of things, which does sucks. Did we say key attributes? Key attributes you need to be a good travel guide?
So I think ultimately one of the biggest ones, I wouldn't say you have to be an extrovert, but I think that you need to have really good people skills, being able to communicate somewhat effectively. Not everyone is going to be waking up having their best day, but sort of knowing that I need to communicate effectively to these people. I need to make them feel a sense of positivity about what's going on, and just being, a relatively personable person. You don't want to be the kind of person that people are going, oh, I don't want to go and talk to them because they're going to be mean to me, or you need to be open, I guess, to having some empathy and being accessible to some extent. As a person, I think is really important. So, being personable, being kind and empathetic, I think those are things that you really need to have.
Very important. I would presume to say that you've probably got, quite a thick skin. You'd have to have a bit of confidence about you, because you are realistically, dictating what 50 grown adults are doing, and sometimes it probably doesn't feel like they are grown adults. We can all be dickheads from time to time, but I'm assuming that you've got to lay down the law. Hey, you need to get here at this point. This is what we're doing today. Get on board, get your shit together, all those kind of things. And you're dealing with people. Everyone travels differently, which is a hard thing to manage.
Definitely.
You must be really good at managing people and multitasking and breaking down problems. And
I got to be.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily say that was something I started with, but when I started doing it, I was 24. I was very young. I'd moved to London just before I turned 24, and so I was still quite young, even though at that time I thought, I'm so grown up. I'm in my early to mid 20s. I'm really, a grown up now. And I think when I look back at her, the end of this year will be 10 years since I moved to London previously. And I think all of those things that I did in the subsequent decade and the experiences that I had, they've molded me into who I am now, which is amazing. But I wouldn't say that I necessarily started off as her, but I learned quite quickly. The training trip that we had to do was quite extensive. So there was a whole group of us who were training to be guides, and essentially we were all put together. We would go to different countries in Europe. It was this very sort of structured thing, and we would have to, be put in front of the microphone quite frequently, and we would have to lead, tours out of that maybe we'd never ever been into that place before.
So it's just thrown in the deep end, beyond throwing in the deep end.
Correct.
Hey, just make it work.
Yeah, that's it. Wow. So we really learned how to do that, and as much as there are some friends of mine, we would say that we are somewhat trauma bonded. That was another thing. That's probably the biggest pro, I think, is probably the friendships you make with your colleagues, those people who really understand what it is to be. And I don't use the term in the trenches lightly. As a history teacher, I very much feel like that's quite a loaded term, but I guess the way that we kind of understand what the trenches meant, it was you were in this place and you didn't really know what was going on, and you were trying to sort of, fight your way through it to become a competent guide. That was a really tricky thing to do, and we all sort of supported each other through it. So some of us, I think we would say jokingly that we are trauma bonded to some extent.
Respectfully, and obviously, I'm not a tour guide, so I can't have a comment here, but the fact that you moved internationally at 24, I think that's incredibly admirable, and the confidence that you would have had to do that I don't think a lot of us could have done that, like you are a young adult at 24, but, like still, have some experience under your belt. But like, good on you to follow your passion. And
growing up somewhere like this as well, we're not the kind of people that live in any kind of... We don't live in a huge city. We're sort of, it's not that I think we're sheltered here, but I think it was a very big move, and I respect that girl for doing what she did. But
100%, yeah.
I think she was also a little bit like, oh damn, this was like a little bit bigger than maybe.
I love that. Oh damn.
It wasn't the first time that I had been to Europe, and it certainly wasn't the first time that I had been. Overseas, and I'd been to London plenty of times previously, but I think, really making that choice, like this is somewhere that I want to make my home, and I'm going off into this huge adventure.
I mean, I really admire that, like you had a very clear intention of what you wanted to do. Like that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And that's the whole reason why we do this podcast, is there's so many of us out there that don't know what we want to do. So hopefully we can take a page out of your book. You briefly touched on it before, entry pathways and how you sort of got in there. So you obviously do a training tour and such. How did you kind of get into it?
So I was already planning on moving. So I'd made sort of preparations to move anyway. I was working in a casual job, and I didn't love it. But it was a great thing to get me through uni. So I had 2 jobs whilst I was doing my first degree. And I was just sitting there going, I really like this degree. Like I studied psychology like you did, and I very much enjoyed the concept of it, but it was really like, what am I actually going to get out of this?
What's the intention of finishing this degree? And
at the end of my 3 years, what is this actually going to mean for me? Like theoretically, I really loved it, and I think it's held me in good stead, or stood me in good stead for the rest of my life choices, as I'm sure we'll come to talk about. But I also feel like at that time I was sitting there going, do I actually want to be a clinician? Do I want to sit across from people? Do I want them to? Do I want to therapize people? Is that the intention? So I was like, what do I want to do if not that? And I was like, I just want to travel. I want to be, and I had already intended to move over there and kind of make some sort of life. And then a girlfriend of mine at the end of the 2016 summer season, the European summer season, I'd seen that, I knew that she'd moved over, but I hadn't seen what she'd been doing.
Okay.
And I was like, that's what I want. So I applied, and I did my little, speech that I had to do as part of my application. And then I got an interview, and I did the speech component of that, and I got through that. And then I got onto the training trip and did that. And I got all the way through. And honestly, it was definitely... I wouldn't say it was a spur of the moment decision, but in order to take that as my path, that was a little bit of the move to London was always something that I wanted to do, but moving towards working in travel, like that was a dream, and I just didn't realize it was accessible to me. So
wow, I'm thinking about it in my mind, just to sort of go, you're young, you're following something, you've done something that realistically, like you can't buy those experiences that you've now had and the places that you've been. And I think a lot of us say, we'd love to travel, and I'd love to see the world, but then none of us really actually take on or move on actions based on that, whereas you have, which I think generally I think you're probably underselling it. I don't think you're giving yourself enough confidence there. But the really important one that everyone loves to know, and it's not the important make or break, but what kind of salary, what kind of coin are we talking here? It's
definitely not. I would say there are people who've made a really great career out of it, and there are people who were doing it before I started and who are still doing it now. Ideally, so my partner and I went back a couple of years ago, and I did do a couple of other trips. So that was nice to we'd taken a year off to travel. So that was a nice little bit of pocket money, so to speak, at that time. But I would say it's not the kind of job that you go into thinking, certainly not the company that I worked for, as much as I adored them. It's not the kind of job you go into thinking, I'm going to make squillions out of this. Yeah. It's experiential.
You're definitely getting, there's definitely a hell of a good perks that come with it, and it's a certain lifestyle and all those kind of things.
Definitely.
I mean, money's not the be-all and end-all by any means, otherwise we'd all be in finance or mining and whatnot. Yeah.
I think roughly it was like, and we're talking pounds, so we were operating in British.
I mean, so that's,
British
that
pounds.
helps.
Certainly coming back home, I would say it was around about like 100 and something pounds per day. So theoretically, if you had like a 28-day trip, you could make, a few grand off that, which was quite good. But I guess the drawback with that, so I did have to get supplementary income. So whilst I was working as a guide during the summer seasons and on occasion in the winter was really great, and I actually loved working the winter. I would often come back home in the shoulder season, so sort of between like September and November, that kind of is when I would come back. And then I would go back for the winter season. So I really enjoyed the winter season, as much as it's cold and it hurts your soul sometimes.
Yeah.
Working in Europe in the winter season, there's Christmas markets, there's skiing, there's all sorts of...
It sounds like magical.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing. But yeah, so because our work was very seasonal, when I was in those sort of off periods, I would work in education in London. So that would kind of supplement my income. So even though on the trip you would get you get like a food amount, you would get all of your accommodation paid for, you would get entry into certain things as the guide, which was really great. I would say ultimately that the amount per day was not too bad, but the fact that you were maybe only working sort of between 100 and 180 days over the summer
does make it tricky. It has limitations. Great that it has really good perks. How do you think of the lifestyle, I guess, is what I'm really curious about, because, you are technically away for, the example you gave of nearly 30 days. Most of us would be like, that's almost, month on, month off kind of stuff. And not all of us can do that. We miss our family, we miss our pets, our loved ones, even just our bed, our own shower. I feel like you'd be really resilient, that you'd be happy to go, yep, this is maybe not the nicest place to stay, but it's got hot water, I've got a belly full of food, this will do.
Yeah.
It sounds like it builds resilience, and I'm not trying to undermine it by any means, because I think, the pros massively outweigh the cons.
For sure.
Yeah.
The cons were always people related, and I genuinely mean that as in you felt like sometimes people would be traveling on a hostel budget, but they had hotel expectations, which was a real challenge because you were trying to meet growing expectations. There was very much like when I sort of first started, and in the decades prior to me starting, there was very much sort of a camp vibe, which was really nice. Like, I think having the opportunity to, you weren't always sleeping in top tier hotels and all that sort of stuff. I think
it is expensive to travel. If people are wanting 5-star hotels, like that costs coin. So sometimes
the primary demographic of our company was a woman in her early to mid 20s. That's the primary demographic. So ultimately, you're not looking at high earning people. These are not people who are traveling with the most like prestigious of companies. These are people travelling with youth travel companies.
Yeah, exactly.
So the budget's going to be a little bit lower.
And I would guess, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, again, this is about experiences. It's not about, yes, I stayed in civil service and all those kind of things, which, don't get me wrong, has its place and it's lovely. But, you are getting much more experience. You're getting a much more authentic avenue. You are getting realistically almost a 24/7 tour guide, which I hope people didn't take too many liberties with, which they probably did. I'm sure there's not many places that can take 50 people as a booking either. Like, that would put in limitations as well. For
sure. And I think maintaining, I would say that by the time I got around to doing this, hostels were the main. There were hotel trips, hostel trips. So the hotel trips were usually for slightly older people, not necessarily. So basically we were sort of looking at people in their 20s and 30s, maybe slightly extending into the late 30s to early 40s, but I would say for the most part, you're sort of sitting in this age bracket. And I would say that most of the time when there was a hotel trip, that people would be in couples, because then they could stay together.
Makes sense. Even numbers, it's just it's always easier.
And definitely, like, I think there are just people who are like, I don't want the opportunity to use a communal shower. Some people aren't bothered, and I think if you're sort of working within that thinking, it's just a place to lay my head. The issue for me, I guess, as the guide was trying to meet expectations and making sure, are they feeling safe? Are they feeling like they're getting some money's worth? Like, have they got a somewhat comfortable bed? Is the place in a good location? And none of that was within my control, but it's, I guess, being seen to be like, well, if there's a big issue, then I need to go and speak to reception and I need to kind of sort those things out. So most people were pretty aware. I think the few issues that I came across that were maybe not like significant, but there were some issues with language barriers from Central South America. Not because I think those people were like, I don't need English. I think they were sold it by travel agents.
Okay.
That the guide would just kind of accommodate their needs. I was like, I don't miraculously
you can't know,
Spanish.
15 different languages.
Correct.
You don't get me wrong, you're very talented, but there has to be a limitation of what the...
It's an English-speaking tour.
Yeah.
I would usually teach people a little bit of the language prior to going into the country. So say we were entering Hungary, for example, I would, teach people how to say hello or good morning or please and thank you and maybe cheers, like a real basic, things
to at least be
greet
polite.
People.
Correct.
Correct.
Please and thank you. Yeah.
And I could order in some countries like Italy and Germany and France, like I could order my own food, but I wouldn't say that I'm sitting here with 40 languages of Europe sitting under my belt, So that was a bit of a challenge, was navigating what travel agents sold it as well and meeting those expectations.
So, I mean, you're dealing with language barriers, you're dealing with potentially unfamiliar country and areas, you're dealing with, effectively tourism and a lot of things that are out of your control. You're dealing with potentially a really challenging group or people that don't travel well. It sounds like quite a lot of pressure is on your shoulders for everyone to have, a great time. This is a bit of a two-part question, I guess. I would presume that you're one of the best people to travel with now because you've probably seen anything and everything.
Ask my partner and he will tell you that is true and simultaneously incredibly untrue.
But you would know the ins and outs.
Yeah, I think I'm just very aware of what it is to travel. That doesn't necessarily make me super easy to travel with, but I don't think that I'm a bad person to travel with because I understand how to...
Yeah.
Booking systems are not terrifying for me. Dealing with, vendors in order to get experiences and all of that sort of stuff. I don't feel intimidated by any of that. Public transport doesn't terrify me. It's really nice to walk around a place now and be able to be a tourist, which is something that was, I would say, to some extent, another con. It was really wonderful, but it also...
You're not taking it in the full experience, I guess?
Correct, because you're so worried.
You're working, you're on your game.
Yes, you're worried that if people go, oh, what's that? And you're like, oh, I didn't look at what that was because I've actually never been here before and I need to somewhat pretend that I know what I'm doing.
Surely you'd get a lot of people that are on this tour or group that are going, okay, well... I'm sure this person can't know absolutely every single thing. In
my first year, I was very conscious of making sure that I knew everything. By about midway through my second year and certainly in my third year, I was like, I don't...
Yeah, I'm human.
I know what I know.
Yeah.
And I'm so confident in what I know. And I know that I'm good at what I'm doing, that it's okay. I went on a trip to Russia through Scandinavia and Russia. And I was like, I've never been to Russia before. And that's not their business whether I've been to Russia before. Yeah,
very true. But, I mean, it seems unfair for them to then, think of that, this person's going to know absolutely everything about Russia.
Yeah. My most terrifying question was, how many times have you done this trip before?
Ooh.
And I was like, ugh. Sometimes I would say, I actually have never done this trip before, but I've been to all of these places. It just might be in a slightly different time frame. It might be, in a slightly different order, but I've been everywhere here. So we're okay. And that was always fine. My favourite was when people would be like, oh, how many trips have you done? And I went back in 2024. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, this is my 31st trip. And they were like, oh. Wow. I was like, correct. That's no less than I deserve, actually. But I think it was a really short trip. It was only about 2 weeks. And it was a backwards tour. So we went through Amsterdam instead of going through Paris. First, we sort of went what we would consider the back way. And I was like, I could do this in my sleep, and I love this. This is a beautiful group of people. The driver is amazing. Really, like, the pair of us were very much like...
Worked so well together and have a good,
we were
collaboration.
old hat at this, like, we just sort of went, oh, okay, we're going to, we're going to Munich tomorrow. Great. Perfect. I
love that's your thought process. Like, yeah, we're going to Munich. No worries.
Yeah. I can do the driving tour with the walking tour with my eyes closed.
Wow.
So I think that very much was a positive thing. But at the beginning of my career, so to speak, I was very terrified about, oh, how many times have you done this one? I was like, oh, well, actually, we're somewhere I've never been before. And I wouldn't say it.
Yeah.
Whereas by year 3, I was like, oh, I've never been here before. And they would be like, wow, wouldn't have known. So I think there was a difference between going, oh, but I have to pretend that I know everything, versus going, well, I'm confident enough in my job and myself and my abilities that I can actually do this effectively, and you wouldn't have known if you hadn't asked me.
I'm just thinking in my mind now, like, I'd love to see your passport and to see all the stamps, because, you've
had
dropped
a British
some
passport,
places.
Mate. Didn't have any stamps.
Which is a shame. I love the stamps. It just seems like, we're not doing, like, stamps aren't a thing in a lot of places anymore, which is really disappointing. But did you have a favourite trip? And I'm not asking specifically, like, a favourite group, but as in a favourite trip rotation, I guess?
That's a very good question.
And I should say for the listeners, like, these are no prep, so I'm just absolutely putting you on the spot here. Sorry.
I very much liked a trip that took us through kind of Central Eastern Europe. So I think people look at Eastern Europe as, like, if they go, oh, I've been to Prague, so I've been to Eastern Europe. Like, Prague is literally in the centre of Europe. Like, Prague is right in the middle. There was a trip that I did that was absolutely amazing, and I only ever did it once, but I've subsequently gone back to the places, and that was sort of going through former Yugoslavia, so places like Bosnia, Serbia. That was really great. Bosnia is one of my favorite. I wouldn't say it's my number one favorite country, but I adore it.
Which is really bizarre. Most people, it's not on their list of places to go.
It's amazing. You should. If you have a chance to go.
Listeners, that's a really good tip.
It's great. So historically, Croatia has the big coastline, like the Adriatic coastline. And when former Yugoslavia was kind of divvied up into the countries that exist now, so Serbia, Bosnia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, and Slovenia. So that was then broken back up into those countries. Croatia got a significant portion of that coastline, and Bosnia only got like 20-something miles, which is kilometres, I can't quite remember, but it's a very short bit of coastline. So I think they felt very hard done by, but they have lakes and mountains, and it is some of the most beautifully scenic places I've ever been in my life. It's amazing. The people are so friendly because they're so glad when people come to visit. The food is great. I'm not a huge meat eater, but there is incredible food for vegetarians and for meat eaters as well. So I think, it got a bit of a raw deal in regards to how we consider Europe and its significance as a cultural tourist kind of place, that the coast is like the place to be. But I think, there's so much in there. So I think having the opportunity to go to North Macedonia, to Slovenia, to Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, like those kinds of places,
which is lovely to hear, because most people are looking at like London, UK, Paris, Amsterdam, like looking at the real, maybe a quick spot in Germany, some a lot of Italy, all those kind of things are tending to be the real hotspots for particularly first time travellers in Europe. There's obviously a lot of pros when it comes to, booking a group and booking a tour guide, is that, you are getting protected, you're getting a little bit of the insight knowledge and all those kind of things. And obviously from this quick conversation, we know you have so much inside knowledge. Did you ever have any guests that, like like they were asking something and you're like, how am I meant to bloody do this? Because surely, there are those people that just expect stuff that you're like, hang on, like this is not what you signed up for.
Yeah, definitely. I can't think of an explicit example right now, but that would be every
couple
trip,
of group. There
would be someone who would be like, oh, what about this? For example, I did have a girl I loved when I could deliver. There was a girl or woman who was just amazing. She was on a trip that I did in the winter, that was just a few different cities in Scandinavia. So the main, Stockholm, Copenhagen and Oslo. And that was such a lovely trip. I think that was the last trip that I did before COVID shut things down, actually. And she was so lovely, and she said, Norway is so famous for salmon, like really good fish. Is there somewhere you can suggest? And the pair of us literally sat together. I said, look, I don't eat a ton of it. Like, I do eat it, but I wouldn't say I go searching for it.
You're not a salmon connoisseur, that's fine.
No, that's it. Like, not enough to know the best place to go in Norway, which is like a country really famous for fish and particularly for salmon. So I was like, I don't know. So I sat with her and I said, look, let's just find somewhere. Let's pick out a couple of places. What do you like the look of the best? I said, these have got great reviews. This is whatever. And so we kind of did that process together. And I think people really appreciated that. So there were some people that could kind of be satiated by the fact they could see the effort that you went to, because sometimes there were people that were just like, oh, we're staying in a hostel and, the shower's not like the best shower I've ever had. I'm like, that's because we're in a hostel, my dude. Like, it'll be what it'll be.
You've got hot water, deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, I remember being, I have done a group tour, and I remember I can't remember where exactly we were, maybe Amsterdam, but like the lift was broken. So we all had to, and it's not a fault of the guide. You haven't gone there the week before and broken the lift.
No, that's it. Well, that you know of.
Well, yeah, if not, if it's a really shitty group, you're like, nah, I'm going to stuff these guys over.
Stuff you.
But, I mean, there's only so much you can do to a certain avenue. And it's, but what a wonderfully rewarding thing to be able to do is, you're directly influencing someone's holiday and experience of, beautiful places and countries. Yeah. And getting to be a part of that, like, you're making memories. Like, it's a, how do you put a price on that? And
you
just
can't.
some of
The short answer is you can't. I think if you try to, then you're going to be miserable.
It sounds like, as much as I don't like this kind of mentality to say that, a career defines someone or a career, changes your life. But I mean, like, you've gone to weddings and engagements and all those kind of things of people that you've, supported through and around countries. Like, if that's not changing life, I don't know what is.
I think that's it. Like, it is not all of my colleagues maybe took it in the way that I did, but I think that's what got me through. And I think having moved into teaching, that relationship, that is the most important thing to me. That's the most significant thing. And I think having built those relationships, that people are, if you have a good relationship with someone, they are more willing to accept when things are challenging as well. If you're making the effort to kind of know them as people and be kind to them and treat them well, that they'll sort of not look at that as any kind of personal thing for you. They'll be like, well, I know that that's not her issue because she wouldn't do that to me.
I mean, you do build, obviously you have to build rapport really quickly. You are travelling with these individuals for sometimes, up to a month or if not over. I'm not sure what the limitations are, but it's not just a casual week with someone. Like, you are generally seeing these people day in, day out. Well, it's a lot of responsibility, but also, I can imagine it would be a fantastic feeling. Really tricky question here. Do you have a favourite country?
Ooh, it is a tricky question, but it's only a tricky question because I think it's so hard to narrow down. Like, I would say I do have a favourite country, but it makes me feel bad for the other countries as if they have feelings.
I mean, they're all fantastic. We can say that. Like, yes. Absolutely.
Because I think when you have the opportunity that I had to be able to go to Paris, every month or whatever, and kind of go, I found this new place. It's amazing. But I think there are just certain places that draw you back. And for me, Austria and Germany were probably Austria more so. But yeah, I think those were the places that drew me back and continually draw me back. Teaching languages now, I am organising a trip at the end of the year for kids to be able to go, and that is something that is so important to me, to be able to provide that experience for these kids. And because I did it when I was their age, that was the
first
linchpin
step
for me. Yeah, wow. That was that moment that made me go, I don't just want to live in Adelaide for the rest of my life.
Very fair. I do want to get to teaching and how the transition and why the transition, because I think it's really important. My last question for sort of the tour guide, and there's so many more I have, but I do want to try and get a good bit of coverage here. How did COVID, and again, this is a very hard question, how did COVID sort of impact, beyond the sort of obviously everything just shut down and went to frickin' bedlam.
That's frickin' bedlam is exactly what it went to. And I think COVID completely changed the trajectory of my life. I think there have been a lot of very significant turning points in my life, and I think COVID was one of them. I loved my job. I absolutely loved it. And I remember working in the office in London and literally watching borders close as we were trying to get these trips back to London, and just it was so devastating. I remember we collectively, the few of us who were still in the office, opened up this live stream thing you've got of Rome, and there was no one there. And I remember looking at it going, oh my God, I've never seen the Trevi Fountain with not a single person. And it was just insane. And I think in that moment that we all kind of realised, like, shit, if the Trevi Fountain
has got no one there,
or the Spanish Steps are empty in the middle of the day, like that is that's a real impact. Such a significant thing.
Yeah, wow.
And I thought, right, the beginning of the season was kind of happening because it was March. So, it was the time that we were sort of preparing for the summer season. So I thought, great, I'll go home, because my other vocation was education. And I was like, well, education and tourism are both deceased at this moment in time. Like, we're not communicating with people face to face. So that was both of my jobs were pretty much gone. I got a flight back home, and I thought I'll stay in Adelaide for a few months until it calms down, and then it didn't calm down.
Yes,
so
the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. So I stayed here, and I just thought, when the opportunity arises, I will go back. And the opportunity didn't arise for a really long time. And as much as that devastated me at the time, I was really upset. Like, I left my friends. One of my friends, him and his fiance, who's another friend of mine as well, they came to visit recently, and I was like, you kept me going in that moment. Like, he dropped me at my storage locker to pick up my stuff, and he took me to the train station that was going to get me to the airport. And I just thought, this is what I'm leaving, like this person that's, sort of dropped me. So that, I think, was a big thing. My livelihood was gone, but also this support network that I had maintained for such a long time, and these beautiful friends I'd made, I was like, they're just gone, on the other side of the world for an indefinite period of time. And so COVID definitely changed things, and I felt like it was for the worst at that moment in time. But I think when I look at what I have now, it changed it for a good reason. But at that moment, it was earth shattering. It was devastating.
I mean, all I can say is, fuck COVID, without
asshole.
Just absolute crazy. Because that was going to be my next question: is would you ever go back? And different time, different play, all those kind of things, different mentality, different priorities.
Yeah, I would, if I could do 2 trips a year, I would do it.
Okay.
From an economic standpoint for the company, I don't think that they would just allow me to do that sort of as an ongoing thing. 2024 was a bit of a different story, but I think sort of moving forward that they wouldn't necessarily want...
They're wanting more regulars.
I think so, that they need that consistency. And the world of travel is changing. They're changing to fit into it. And, I just think I love it, and it's... being able to kind of execute this trip at the end of year will bring these 2 parts of me together that I think really culminate sort of into who I am as an adult. And I say an adult in my early to mid 30s. I've only just gotten here. But I think that really, so do I want to go back specifically into youth travel? Probably not. But would I love the opportunity to do kind of a couple of trips a year to keep that alive? Like, I would jump on that if it fit into my life.
You never know, there might be the possibility, and that's something that happens moving forward. You mentioned the Trevi Fountain. I've been in the Trevi Fountain a couple of times, and the last time was in the last 6 months with my wife, and we did the very touristy thing of we got up at like 4 a.m. so that it wouldn't be as crowded, and you're right, like there was still like 50 odd people there at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
One of the most impressive things I've seen is that there were actually a small group of probably about 5 or 6 young girls who were in like their full dress, like as in like they'd been at the club and they'd pushed through and they'd come straight from the club to then the Trevi Fountain. So they were in like, their short skirts, their heels, makeup, full dolled up, probably dancing all night. and it's 4 a.m. Like, we've both got coffee in hand, my wife and I, and, you know, enjoying this beautiful fountain. And I'm just sitting there, and one of them's like falling asleep because she's so tired, and one of them's like rubbing her feet, you know, because like they've just been up all night. And I'm like, that is bloody awesome. The dedication, that. Absolutely love it. And it's something like I still think about today because it was so cool.
That's so great.
As much as I don't want to transition, I do want to transition because I do think, you know, your experience and for the reference, if you did go back, I know you'd be a fantastic tour guide in any demographic, because in the near 40 minutes that we've been chatting, like, I can just tell the passion of where you are, like, just of chatting about you just love it. I can tell you just love it, which is so nice. Having said that, teaching is also just as important and incredibly rewarding. I'd love to know how you made the transition, and you don't have to go in specifics and tell your full story in detail, but, you know, you've gone from almost, you know, teaching and managing young adults to then also teaching and managing young children or children and such. And there are similarities, I got to admit.
Yeah, huge similarities. I think a lot of, so I would say there are a lot of people who became guides for the company that I worked for, and probably for others as well, who had been teachers prior to doing that. I went the opposite way, and when I got home in 2020 and I thought, what have I gotten myself into? What am I going to do? The only thing that I could think that would bring me some level of the amount of joy was teaching, because I just thought that's kind of what I've been doing. And I had worked in education. I worked in special education.
Yeah, you're doing it while you were in UK.
In London. So that was I wasn't working as a teacher, obviously. I was working as a teaching assistant and supporting people in their classrooms, special needs classrooms specifically. But I really loved it. And I think, again, it was, for me, that big thing was relationship building. And I think when I think about all of the stuff that I know, and I don't mean that in any kind of, you know, egotistical kind of way, but I've accumulated
I mean it in an egotistical way. Like, I wish I had your experiences and knowledge. I really do.
It was the only thing that I could think, how can I bring these two things kind of together? And the relationship building of teaching plus the ability to kind of impart knowledge.
Yeah, wisdom and knowledge,
is something that I genuinely love. And as much as I work in a school where there are significant challenges to some students in terms of socioeconomic, you know, demographic kind of, I wouldn't say it's a place where the upper echelons of society are sending their children. There are really wonderful kids there, and I think there's just such an opportunity for just imparting knowledge and building those relationships, and that to me is that's the important bit, you know. So I think I couldn't think of anything else. The thought of sitting in an office day in, day out doing something that I didn't want to do was just hell on earth to me. There are days where I think, oh God, hell on earth, it's mighty toasty in here, you know, but I also think that I then get to come back kind of the next day, and whilst we don't necessarily have a blank slate, that there is opportunity for rebuilding of that relationship if it does falter. And I think that's what I love. The big thing that is different is that the adults are kind of, because they're paying you, you know, you're on like the same level as them. You're the authority figure, but you're not the authority figure because everyone's an adult. Whereas when you're working with children, that you are literally like, I am a grown-ass woman here, and these kids are, you know, they don't always respect it in the way that you hope, but I think also I feel a level of confidence in that role because I know that I'm the authority figure in the room.
I love that both examples, your guiding experiences, you're creating, you know, you're sharing knowledge, you're literally creating people, and I don't mean that in you know a simplistic form of, you know, like you're birthing someone, but like you're generally making humans. Like I've gone on a group tour. Travel is a huge experience for a lot of individuals, and it does change their mindset and their outlook on life and all those kind of things, as well as education. Like you strike me as a person who, like, you're making a real impact. And I'm not trying to be condescending, and I'm not trying to flatter you. I honestly believe this. You are generally like shaping people. Yeah. Which is really cool.
Yeah. It's a huge responsibility, and I think it's one that had I come straight out of school that maybe I wouldn't have taken on in the way that I do now. But having lived a different life, I feel that's one I feel ready to take on, and sure, some days it's shit, but a lot of the days I have students who are amazing. I have two very specific examples of how I probably have, seen that exemplified. When I worked as a guide, I remember having to take people to concentration camps on a somewhat regular basis. Most general Central Europe, like Central, West, East European trips would go through a concentration camp of some description. Whether that be in Germany or in Poland or in Austria, there would usually be one on a standard itinerary if you go through those particular places. So I remember I would say to them on the way in, I said, I don't want to hear about the heating's going to be amazing. Your bed is going to be the most comfortable bed you've ever slept in. The meal's going to be the best meal you've ever eaten. Like, if I hear a single complaint, I'm going to be really cranky, because I think if you have not taken anything from what we have experienced today, that's going to crap me off to no end, basically.
Have respect for the actual location. Maybe.
Correct. Like, we have the opportunity to visit these places as guests and as witnesses to kind of this experience. So I would get very short with people being like,
very, very fair.
Maybe something doesn't quite meet your expectation, but holy crap, you're not imprisoned. Like, everything is kind of good for you.
Yeah, you're doing well, given that you weren't here at the time of when things were
you
really
got to
bad.
visit this as a visitor on purpose, not because you were sent here. So and I remember one day one of the guys was getting out of it was in the middle of winter. So to be fair, in Germany in winter, it's not particularly toasty. It's quite a fresh environment. And he went to get out the coach and went, I'm a little bit caught. And he
just looked at you like...
He side-eyed me and went, And I was like, correct answer, my friend.
Yeah,
we are going to be...
weather.
Yeah, it's delightful. Look at that coat you've got on. Look at those shoes.
Exactly, you're wearing shoes,
Stop. No one's making you stand and...
You have hair,
Correct. Like, roll call until someone drops dead. Like, we're not playing that game. And I think that's very much an experience that I kind of, not that specific experience, but I think that's something that I very much try to impart to the kids. Like, you are here not by necessarily your own choice, but you are in such a privileged position to be here and to be able to have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah. I completely agree. I have gone to 2 separate concentration camps in Germany, and it is an absolute privilege, as much as I'm not trying to say that in a positive way, but just to be there and experience it, it does feel like you are on kind of hollow ground, and there's definitely an aura around that you go, okay, this is serious. Like, this is serious now. Like, you don't be an idiot, don't be a dickhead. Like, this is, and I like that you really took that seriously, because it is important to acknowledge our history, and whether it is in the classroom or it is on physically the ground that it occurred on.
Definitely,
very important.
I think that's it. That the first time I ever went, I was 16, and I think that made such an impression on me. That the thought of being able to take, and I've spoken to the kids very openly, the ones that were sort of in the process of getting this trip to Germany and Austria kind of planned for the end of the year, and I've spoken very openly to them about the fact that it's a really tricky thing to be able to do. But I said, what a privilege to be able to, all these things that you're learning, basically from year 10, kids start learning about World War II, and they know about it. As a German teacher, there is a lot of somewhat inappropriate conversation that will sometimes come up in my classroom, and I try very hard to stamp it out in the sense of, please don't discuss it in this way, but if you want to talk about it because you feel a bit confused and you feel a bit unsure, then come and talk to me, because I'm actually very well placed to discuss this with you. But I think they really start, kids sort of pre-year 10 are a little bit naive about it, and they make jokes, and the man with the funny moustache and all that sort of stuff. And then I think once they really learn it in year 10, they have a better appreciation. So all the kids coming are year 10 and above. So I think they will have had the opportunity to kind of learn about it in this way, and then, they'll be able to have that opportunity.
Definitely have much more appreciation. I remember being a young gentleman and, thinking things were silly and no worries at all, and then being older, just generally really being able to take, understand the substance of what I'm actually doing, and, going, okay, this is a really, yes, it was a bleak part of history, but it's very important to acknowledge, and, hopefully that means that us as a society learn and learn better and do things better moving on in the future, to say the least.
Definitely.
But I mean, The experience, I can't get over my mind of the experiences that you've then had and the ones that you're creating for yourself now. You know, you're obviously have been so impacted by not only Europe, but just traveling and all that kind of self-growth. And then you're directly impacting future generations to also have that experience. It's pretty bloody rewarding.
It definitely is. I think, like I said before, had I come straight out of school, I think I may have left the profession.
I'm very glad you didn't, because, you know, it's worked out really, really well.
Yeah, it's definitely like, I mean, I'm definitely on holidays at the moment and enjoying that, but I also, after a period of time, kind of go, all right, well, I'm ready to get back.
I mean, you're
now.
Early to mid 30s. Like, you've got so much life to live, and you've already lived so much life already. Yeah. Who knows what you're going to be doing in the next 10 years? I'm excited to see.
That is true. It definitely is not a stable kind of situation. And I don't mean that as in I'm feeling currently unstable, but I look at career sort of projection, and I always will say to the kids, if they're sitting there going, oh, but I don't know what I want to do, I don't know what subjects I want to pick and all of that, I'm like, do you know what? Who cares? Yeah. Who actually gives a shit? Because ultimately, if you have a thing in your mind and you have a direction that you want to go in, that's fabulous. I love that for you. Like, pick that. Yeah. You want to be a nurse? Brilliant. Then pick biology, pick maths, pick whatever. Like, great. But if you don't know, who gives a shit? Yeah. Pick the stuff that you're good at, that you enjoy, and that you're going to have the greatest success with in year 12, because then your ATAR will be, you know, the highest that it could possibly be, and then the world is your oyster. Like, you can choose kind of what you want to do. And if you get into that degree and you go, ew, this is gross, I don't like it.
So you can change. Yeah.
Great. Because honestly, I am in my early to mid 30s.
Early 30s, let's be honest, early 30s.
Correct, that's so true. And I'm the most stable that I've ever been, but I have not been stable really up to this point, because I've been living my life and finding out what works for me.
But stability is overrated. Like, yeah, if I sit and say, you know, and this is a bit bleak, so I do apologise, but if you and I are both, you know, 95 and we're both on our deathbed, the experiences that you have, and hopefully we can both remember them at that point, but the experiences that you have compared to someone who's been in the same career, straight out of uni, straight out of school, straight out of uni, into job, been there 50 years, that might be wonderful. And, you know, I'm not judging that by any means, but I know which one I'd prefer, to say the least. And I think that's the beauty of travel and also of education, is that, you know, it creates so much more openness to whatever path you want to take. And you know, like, we're particularly in Australia, which is fantastic, and, you know, we've got a great society, and I always thought Aussies were really relaxed, and then I went to different places and I'm like, no, we're actually quite uptight or quite regimented. And you go to, you know, Italy, and the train stations are never on time, or, you know, they're a couple of minutes late, or, you know, you go to UK and they just, once the pubs are full, you just spill out into the street and have a drink, and you just little things that you go, like, life is fascinating. And it's, we're getting a bit I don't know, a bit philosophical here, yeah. But it's there's a magic. I don't know. There's a bit of a fantasy there, that there's just so many things that you can do, and I
think living like that gives you the opportunity to be philosophical. I think it's not just a one size fits all, and there are some kids who literally know from day dot what it is they're going to do. I know you and I were discussing previously people we'd been to school with, and that there are those people that just knew what their job was, and that's what they do, and that's what they still do, and they love it, presumably, from what I can, you know, based on interactions with them. But I think, there are people like you and I who have lived different lives, and we've found our path, and is that the one we're going to stick to in 10 years? Who knows? But I will never dissuade a kid from making the choice that works for them now, knowing that if it doesn't, that's okay. They're not tied into life, you know, that they can make choices that are going to make them happy further down the track. Did I ever think, when I left school when I was 17, almost 18, did I ever think someone is going to pay me to go to Paris once a month? Yeah. To be able to get to the top of, you know, a mountain in Switzerland, and then go to Italy the next day and eat pasta, and someone was going to, like, cover that meal. And then I was going to be able to, you know, go and take people on a tour of Rome. No one ever said to me that that is possible. And I think that that's okay to know that that's not possible. But if you give yourself the flexibility and go, well, I, at 16, have planned my life out, love that for you. Love that for you. That's amazing if that's what you want. But if you are open to possibilities, my God, you have no idea what you can do and where it's going to lead you. And, you know, I just think that's the beauty of growing up. Like, growing up is not going, oh, great, I can go and drink alcohol now.
Yeah, I can drive a car. I can, I can buy cigarettes. I can do what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The beauty of growing up is, and I say this very much in the, like, Australian context, that we are very lucky here that not everyone in yours and my position has this opportunity, not to get political about it, but we are very much growing up in a position where this is possible for us, and the people around us who are young people in a relatively similar situation, that is also possible for them too. And that if they decide they want to do something and that's what they do, then that's great. But if you decide to change your mind,
it's okay.
Great.
Yeah.
That's okay. No one should judge you if you have the capacity to do that. No one should judge you for going, that was great for me back then, but now I have a different view of life and now I want to do X, Y, and Z. Like, that's
very good advice.
Amazing.
We are coming to time. I've got one final question. If there's any listeners out there who are thinking of becoming, you know, a travel guide or a teacher or both, what advice would you give them?
I would say if you're looking to go into tourism or travel specifically, I think tourism is such a broad thing, but travel specifically, travel yourself first.
Okay.
And I don't mean like you don't have to go on a round the world trip or anything
but
like
just
that.
Bits and pieces.
Yeah,
you know.
just make sure that you have got some level of comfortability with moving around in a place that you don't know.
The unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of, I would say that nowadays with travel being so accessible to so many people, that the people within the travel industry are not looking for someone who's sat at home in their country town and not ever gone anywhere.
I mean, that's fair.
I would say the travel industry is definitely looking for people who are wanting to live a dynamic life, and that doesn't mean to say that you need to be some sort of nomad.
Yeah, very fair, but you need to have some kind of experience. You know, you've at least, you know, either backpacked or you've gone to some hostels, or you've, you know,
for sure, just have left your place for somewhere that's not your own. And teaching, I absolutely adore being a teacher, but I think I still come home and grizzle about it all day long.
We all do though. That's work. Like, they have to pay you to do it, so you know,
for sure.
Yeah.
But I would say if someone is looking to go into that, do not be afraid to go and live something else before you do it. That's not for everybody, and I have plenty of colleagues who are still teaching who have just taught their whole life, and that's what they've done. And some of them have taught at the same place that I'm currently working at, and that's the only place that they've been. But I would say in terms of self-satisfaction and bringing something to my current role, I think what I have brought to it is a bit of a knowledge of the world. Like, I haven't just been at school my whole life, is that I lived a different life. So it's okay to go and get your degree, and then it's okay to go and do something else and come back to it, or go and do something else and then get your degree, you know, whatever that might be. But there's nothing wrong. You are not less employable just because you haven't been a teacher from the second that you left school. I think what you can bring to a job like this is life experience, and ultimately having gotten some of that, that's not going to make you any less employable as a teacher, and it will certainly make you more employable as a guide. So go and live your life.
Very fair. Don't
pretend like you have to come off the factory, you know, conveyor belt,
off that line, you know, straight out of school, straight into uni, straight into career. Yeah, very fair.
Do what you want.
That's really good advice. We're going to end on that advice. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for giving up. You know, we are lovely outside, as you can hear from the background noise. You've given up your Sunday. Thank you. Your Saturday. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
I think some really sound advice in this episode as well, and some fantastic life experiences.
Thank you for having me. It's been such a joy.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.